What's the one thing you know now about autism that you wish you'd known at the very start?
Just that it's okay, that it's not a problem, that it's not a crisis, and there's actually a lot of beauty in it. Hi, this is Guy Shahar, founder of Transforming Autism. Normally, I'd be sitting here talking to a parent or thought leader in the world of autism to try to hear their story and glean some insights and inspiration about how best to look after our autistic children. But because this is Small Charities Week, we're going to do things a little bit differently this time. The tables have been turned on me, and I'm going to introduce instead Pip Lever, who's a trustee of the charity Transforming Autism and who's been a big supporter of ours for many years, and who is also a grandmother to an autistic granddaughter. So welcome, Pip, and enjoy your new role.
Does it feel strange, Guy?
It really does, yeah.
So as you say, I'm Pip Lever. I've been a trustee here for coming up to about a year, and my drive to be involved with Transforming Autism, as you rightly said there, Guy, is on the back of having a granddaughter who is non-verbal autistic. And my world opened up as a result of that, very much for the positive, I would say, as well as understanding the challenges that came around it. So that's what led me to be here, to be very much involved. And I'm super excited to be this side of the mic, having a conversation with you, Guy, one of the founder of the charity as well. So it's exciting times. So as you say, the episode is going to be a little bit different. We're marking the Small Charities Week, celebrating the role of small charities like us and what they play when it comes to the role they play when it comes to changing lives and supporting communities. Transforming Autism is taking part in the Big Give Small Charity Week campaign. So this is a really timely opportunity, and it gives us an opportunity to reach out to our listeners, Guy, doesn't it, to help encourage donations. So it must be a bit different for you, Guy, this side of the mic, as I said. So I'm really curious because obviously I know your story. I've seen the TED Talk. We've spoken loads. But I'm really interested to get a really good feel and understanding for what was the actual moment that autism kind of entered your life, that moment when you realised that maybe something you'd been thinking was actually reality, and it was no longer tapping on your shoulder. You had to kind of take stock.
Well, I guess autism's always been in my life because, you know, whether I've known it or not, you know, as a child, growing up as an autistic child, but without any understanding of what that meant. So at the beginning, it was that I thought there was something wrong with me. I didn't have any understanding of autism, what it was. When I was at university, I sort of started thinking, without really knowing what autism was, but I started having this idea, well, maybe I'm autistic, maybe. And I mentioned it to a few people and they sort of were like, they sort of had, you know, a slight recognition of, you know, almost like, well, yeah, I'm not really surprised. But the first time I became aware of autism as a sort of real concept in my life was with my son.
Okay.
It was when he was in his very early months. He was fine as a baby. He was really happy, and you know he enjoyed life, and he was always laughing and very sociable. And then at the age of about 1, things started to change. He started to withdraw from us. He started to be very overwhelmed by things all the time. And it became really difficult to reach him. And it became really difficult to have any communication with him, any contact with him. It almost felt like he was rejecting us at that point. And it was actually my mom who had the idea, well, maybe he's autistic. And so, yeah, so it went on from there. And so that was the main, you know, that was the first really sort of tangible and significant introduction to the idea of autism in life.
And Guy, at that moment when you were kind of dealing with the fact your son was you said, was retreating and things were definitely shifting and changing, how did that actually feel for you from an emotional perspective? How was that landing for you?
it was like a grief. It was like this sense of, it looks like we're losing our son and we don't know what's going on. We don't know why. We don't know how. I mean, he's still there. He's not died or anything, but it's as if he's withdrawn from us to the extent that, he almost doesn't identify as our son. It almost felt like that. So yeah, it was this sense of like loss of something so precious, both for us and for him.
Yeah. And at that point, Guy, did you have a moment of kind of going, gosh, where do we go from here? What's the future going to actually be looking like, both for your son, but also for you? How did that manifest itself for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was months. It was months of like, what the hell do we do about this? And it was like we went through all the cycles of trying to understand it. Was there something wrong with us and the way we'd parented him? Was there something wrong with him? Were we just not understanding something that we should be understanding? Were we going wrong somewhere? But most importantly, what do we do about it? And when it became clearer that it was probably autism, because he didn't get his diagnosis till he was nearly 3, but it was very evident to us much earlier than that. It was a question of, what do we do? How do we help him? We went through the cycles of, we have to fix this. We have to get rid of the autism. This was our first, way of framing it and conceiving of it. I think a lot of parents go through that. And sometimes parents feel guilty later about feeling like that. And sometimes parents are made to feel guilty by other people for feeling like that. But it is actually a natural step that you go through when, especially when that's the messaging that's coming at you. And this was like more than 10 years ago, so it was much more prevalent at that time as well, that sort of thinking. It didn't last for that long, but it was there. We did go through that stage. We went through all of the, the mainstream health service routes as well, which were, they almost they seemed so disproportionate at first. We were going to the doctors with these catastrophic things that we were reporting. And they were saying, oh, he probably just can't hear you. Let him have a hearing test. And then a vision test just to check that he can see and hear you properly, which clearly was missing the mark. And they made us repeat those 2 or 3 times just to be sure before doing anything else. So weeks and weeks and weeks were passing. So it took, I won't go into all the details. I wrote there's a whole chapter in the book about that horrific few months.
I'm curious to ask you a question about what you just said there,
sure.
About the whole rinse and repeat, having to go back and another hearing test, another eye test, whatever it might be. What was the impact of that also, though, for you and your wife within that journey, at that point in the journey?
Yeah.
That seemingly didn't feel like there was any progress happening.
It adds to the feeling of hopelessness.
Right.
It adds, it's almost like, well, the way we framed it in our heads at that time, these are the professionals. They know what they're doing. They're the ones who've got the answers for us, and they don't have any answers for us on this. Therefore, it must be unsolvable. That's the. We don't think in that way anymore, but that's the impact at that time, because you do look to the health people as the experts, as the ones who are the ones, if anyone can help, they can help. And when it's so clear that they can't help and that they actually don't know what they're doing, it feels as if like nobody can help us.
And at that stage, it's almost paralysis, isn't there? I'm just thinking about with my granddaughter as well, that almost the unknown. I don't know what I don't know. And I'm really reliant upon someone who I'm hoping does know what I don't know to fill in the gaps and point me in the right direction. So tell me a little bit about, so from that moment of recognizing this is where your son was at that point in time, and almost the lack of help you were getting from the professionals at that moment in time. How did things change for you? What was the trigger that took you to a place of going, right, what can we do?
I think it was increasingly poor and insensitive handling by the doctors that we were dealing with at the time. which actually added many, many more layers of unnecessary trauma. There's one incident, again, I won't go into the details, but it's like there was one doctor who, we gave them all of the information about him, what triggers him, what sensitizes him. And that person said, no, don't worry, trust me, I'm an expert. I know what I'm doing. I've been doing this for 30 years. Really talking down to us almost as if we were questioning her expertise. So he said, okay, go. And within 10 seconds, she'd done about 5 of the things that we told her not to do. Our son was totally out of control. He was like screaming. He was in an enormous meltdown in the hospital. And she went, I don't know what to do about him. And she wrote in her final report that I wasn't able to complete the examination because he didn't cooperate, almost like fully. And, when that happened, that was just the icing on the cake almost. It wasn't very nice cake. That was the trigger that made us say, these people are not going to help us. We're going to either have to do things ourselves or find other people who can help us, who are maybe outside of the mainstream medical profession, or a combination of both of those things. And so that was the turning point.
Guy, isn't it? That in itself, though, getting to that point where you almost feel like you're backed into a corner, that the people or the authorities that we believe we should be able to rely upon to be able to help us. Clearly, things have moved forward dramatically over the last few years. And we'll talk about that a bit later on. If that's the bit that projected you forward, as a normal human being, how do you then take that and make something actually happen? That must have been really challenging, utilizing all your skills and your ability and your strength, I would imagine.
Yeah, and it was disorienting, and there's so many competing voices out there. There's a lot of commercial voices out there as well, that are very good at sounding very compelling, but on a bit of closer scrutiny, it's just money-making opportunities, and you've got to tell the difference between them. And this was 2011 when this was happening. So it was the relatively early days of the internet. So it was a sort of a bit of a Wild West. It was much easier to be deceived on the internet. There was a lot more crude claims of what, was achievable. And it was hard. I mean, all we had at that time was our intuition to guide us. And that's all we've got. But, a parent's intuition is often underestimated. We really sort of, especially when we've got that real drive and that real single-minded purpose to do what's best for our child. Our intuition sort of cooperates with that in some way. And you sort of start seeing through what the manipulation is. And you also start seeing through to where the genuine claims might be coming from. And what we ended up finding that we both resonated with, me and my wife, was a website for a center in Israel called the Mifne Center, which only works with children up to 2 years old. And it was just a page. It was just a page, and there was hardly any information about them. And we actually found them through a parenting book that we bought, where there was just a passing paragraph about the results that they'd achieved with very young autistic children. But it resonated. So we did our due diligence in a way. We found other families who'd been there, and we talked to them. We got a sense of how they work, and it was only it wasn't a very detailed sense, but it was just a sense that okay, this is in line with sort of what we feel is right and respectful for him. And we ended up going there. And that wasn't an easy thing because it wasn't a cheap therapy. So, on the surface, it did look like a bit of a scam. And even though we checked it out and talked with them and talked with other families that had been there, I remember thinking on the flight over there, what if we arrive there? What if we arrive there and there's nothing there and it was just a big scam to take our money? And to be fair to them, they only took a small percentage of it at the beginning, and we paid the rest after we arrived. So that was good. but we had to sort of put everything we had into there. We had to borrow from everybody we could borrow from, get as many gifts and donations from people. And we were only just able to scrape the ability to go there. But it did change everything. It completely transformed everything. When we went there, Daniel was sort of really unable to manage himself at all. Emotionally, he was overwhelmed by everything. He was constantly crying, constantly feeling that everything was too much. We never saw a smile. He never at that time looked us directly in the eye. By the end of it, it was different. He was a very happy, smiling child. He was laughing again. He was enjoying time with us again. We were connecting again. So, yeah, on that occasion, it was the right thing to do.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because on that occasion, it clearly was the right thing to do. And the sacrifice, the work, the effort that went into making it happen. As you said, you'd do anything for your son. And in some ways, your son is teaching you that, isn't he? He's showing you that to give you the strength and the desire to want to do all that you can for him. What were the key things? You said, he suddenly started to, not suddenly, but he started to engage more. When those things started to happen, what were if you can remember, Guy, what were your reflections on your journey to that point?
I think at that time I was just more, I was in the moment. It was a really joyful, whereas the previous months had been a really draining and traumatic time. This was a bit of a reward for that. This was a sort of reconnection, and it was a fulfillment, and it was a really happy time. And really, I didn't really think back again on those early moments until I came to write the book, and that was like 5 years after that, 4 or 5 years after. And it was actually, it was really surprising how much I remembered of what happened. I hadn't revisited it for 4 years or so. And everything came back in real detail, the conversations, it was clearly stored somewhere, but, I just needed a 4-year break from it before doing anything with it.
And writing the book, did that feel kind of almost slightly cathartic as well?
No, it was just surreal. It was actually surreal. It came about, I was at work shortly before starting to write the book, doing a job that was totally the wrong job for me. And if I'd known that I was autistic at the time, I would have known in advance that it was the wrong job for me. I was working in a commercial IT company and doing work that was really a drain on me on so many levels. And I was avoiding a meeting along with another colleague who wasn't very impressed with the meetings. And we went into another room, and she said to me, why don't you write a book about what happened with you and your son? And I said, well, it's a nice idea, but I don't have the time to even read a book, let alone write a book. And also, I'm still in this process. This is still unfolding. Maybe in 10 years, I could think about writing a book. And then that evening, I went home thinking, well, I put that idea to bed. And I just found myself opening a Word document and starting to type. I didn't really know what I was doing. It was sort of bypassing my conscious mind. And it ended up being the introduction to the book, or the first chapter, I don't remember. And I thought, what am I doing this for? I actually said I wasn't going to. I actually decided firmly not to do this today. And over the coming weeks, it started to come. And during that time, I actually had a breakdown, a whole health breakdown as a result of being in the wrong work for so long. I actually woke up one morning and I wasn't able to sort of get up. I literally wasn't able to stand up. So I was pretty much housebound for about 3 months. I didn't know what was going to happen. I lost that job in the end, which was a blessing. And I literally couldn't do anything. Just the idea of checking my emails seemed just overwhelmingly large. But what I was able to do, it seemed to be coming from a different place and drawing on a different source of energy, was I was able to continue with the book, which I'd started. And again, I didn't even know it was going to turn into a book. I just thought, well, what am I doing? It's going to end up as a little pamphlet of 30 pages or something. And it ended up getting bigger and bigger and bigger and more detailed and having more and more reflections in it. Yeah. And that's how it came about. It came about against all the odds in a situation that was not conducive to it.
And again, there's a couple of things you said there that when you were talking, I was thinking through kind of my experiences again with my granddaughter and other people I know. And there's a couple of things that sit there for me that I wonder, to your point there about having the reaction you had to the job you had at that moment in time, I wonder how many people might be currently that might resonate with, that they're in a role, or maybe they're in a relationship, or they're in some situation that they're struggling to understand, to navigate in a way, but yet there might be something that sits behind that for them, which could be a diagnosis of autism. Okay. So being able to look back on that now and kind of going, yeah, I recognise why that role was not going to be the right role for me with my diagnosis is quite powerful, isn't it, for you? Mm. So I'm just putting that out there, that question for people to think about. What could be sitting around this? What could I observe? Where could I go for maybe some help and support to help manage and work through that? I think the other thing that also I'm curious about, Guy, is at what point do you think the relationship with your son's journey played into you thinking, do I need to have a look at this for myself? Do I need to consider this for myself? How did those two bits hang together for you?
It was after I started the charity, actually.
Oh, okay.
So the timeline is the book came first, early 2016. The TED Talk came end of 2016 because of the book. Actually, led to the TED Talk, and then the charity came. It was conceived of before that, but it was formed a few months after that. And through meeting a lot of autistic. It's a sort of amplified version of what I was telling you about when I was at university, that I was meeting people and I was thinking, do you know what? This I have more in common in certain ways, or there's certain things that I recognize in these people in myself that I haven't seen widely before in many other people. And I did say to some of them sometimes, I think I might be autistic, and people replied like, well, yeah, of course you are. And someone said, well, yeah, of course. Do you think I'm stupid? Of course you're autistic. So, I mean, it was really obvious to them. And then, through meeting the specialist who we talked to, Tony Atwood was very instrumental in helping me understand it as well. So it came at that point.
Do you know what the things were that these people who were going, of course you are, Guy? What were they seeing? What were they observing?
I don't know. I didn't ask them, actually. I sort of just took it as well. Yeah.
How funny. I'd be really interested. I'd go, give me the evidence. What have you got to share with me?
Well, I mean, I suppose the reason I didn't do that is because I'd already had that thought. Yeah. And I maybe hadn't formulated why. Maybe it was more of a feeling, more of a sense of, well, something I recognize. I'm not even sure what it is. So yeah.
And I wonder also whether the why actually doesn't really matter. It's the how you deal with this now moving forward. What can you put in place in order to give you the best opportunities to harness the world in the way that you want to harness it, having this piece of information? Would you see that as being different?
Yeah. I mean, I seem to have a journey with most things. I had a journey with this information as well. So at the beginning, I thought, well, knowing that I'm autistic is not going to make any difference at all. I already thought that I was. It's just a label. It doesn't make any difference. I'm the same person as I was before. So for the first couple of years, when people asked me what difference has it made knowing that you're autistic, I said, well, it hasn't really made any difference at all. I'm still the same person. But it was only later that I realized that it actually had made an enormous difference. And the difference it made is that I slowly started to think of myself differently. So rather than thinking by default, whenever anything went wrong, whenever there was a complication, instead of thinking by default, there's something wrong with me, I started thinking, there's nothing wrong with me. This is just who I am. So there's that self-acceptance that had never been there before. And somehow knowing that I was autistic, and I wish it hadn't taken this. I almost wish that it was there anyway without a label, but it wasn't. It sort of gave me that level of self-acceptance. And of course, when you have a level of self-acceptance, what happens by extension is that you have acceptance and compassion for other people in general as well. It's almost like self-acceptance has to come first. And if someone doesn't accept themselves, there's no way in this world that they're going to fully accept everybody else.
I think that is such a powerful message, Guy. Such a powerful message. And thinking about, a number of individuals and people around the world who potentially haven't been in that situation yet to have a diagnosis which helps them understand and be accepting of themselves. I mean, there has to be something there, surely, that we can, more can be done about to help get people to that stage. I mean, having a level of self-acceptance can be a challenge for people at the best of times. When you suddenly introduce what is a label on top of it and other people's perceptions of that label, potentially it makes that self-acceptance even harder. So that's really interesting. That there's something around that for a grandparent with my granddaughter. I watch her, Guy, and she lights up my world. And I watch her learn and I watch her explore. And I would my heart would be completely warm if I know that she has that level of self-acceptance as to who she is. Now, she might not have that at 5, nearly 6, but as she grows, as she becomes older, to be in a world that offers that is huge, surely.
Well, that is exactly what the charity is for, is what Transforming Autism is for. It's to empower parents to plant that seed of self-acceptance. Really, if I had to sum it up in one core idea, that's what it is: to empower parents to implant that seed of self-acceptance in a child from a very, very early age. And I think it is possible before, however conscious a child is cognitively of the world around them or not conscious, on some level, they are conscious of themselves and their place in the world. Every child is. And that's what drives how they see themselves in the future. It's what drives how they carry themselves in that moment. And so we're talking about like children in the very early months and years, giving them this sense of that I am fine, whoever I am, whatever I am, it's absolutely fine. It's perfectly acceptable. And that's why we as a charity focus on the parent more than the child, because it's the parent who's the vehicle for that message. It's the parent who has to deliver that message, and not with words, because words will just go over the head of the child. The child will say, well, why are you saying all this weird stuff to me? It's through showing their own unconditional acceptance of the child. And that's hard in a world where the parents themselves are getting messages, there's something wrong with your child. When the parents are getting messages, oh, your child isn't hitting their milestones, or your child is different from most of the children in school. How do we help the parents to retain that unconditional acceptance and love, and to see the value and to see all the positive qualities in their own child at that time? Because if they can do that, and if they convey that sense to the child from that early age, that the child is fine as they are, that's going to stay with the child for their whole life. And then whatever adversity they get later in life, I'm not suggesting their life's going to be easy. I'm not suggesting that the barbs of the world are going to be like really easy to withstand or anything like that. But they will have that foundational level of self-belief that can prevent the worst sort of, degeneration into mental health crises that a lot of autistic people find themselves in.
That resonates with me completely, Guy. I was just thinking when you were talking then, one of the things I noticed observing my daughter when she became Alea's mum and the journey that Alea went on, my granddaughter, was there was a moment where my daughter had to get to a point where she could turn down the internal noise for herself. So the questioning, the what do other people think? What are people, what are they making of this situation? Am I doing the right thing? Am I not doing the right thing? Where do I go? Almost overwhelming noise that occupied her mind, which would then almost be in a bit of an invisible barrier between her and her child, her daughter. And it was really, when you just said that, I went, oh my gosh, I can picture the moment when my daughter got to the point of being able to mute out that noise and have her level of self-acceptance, of going, as a parent of this extraordinary child that I'm gifted to have, this is my journey with her, my journey. And that was massively powerful, massively powerful.
Yeah.
So when you think about the hundreds, thousands of parents that Transforming Autism have worked with, and you've been involved in, what are the key messages? What are the key things they kind of are struggling with?
I think, if you boil it down to one thing, it probably comes down to this acceptance of the child. And it can manifest itself in different ways. It might not look like I'm not accepting my child, but it's like, it's like my child's not eating, my child's not sleeping, my child is behaving in this way, my child's not doing this. And so, the frame is there's something wrong with my child. And, every child, every parent will manifest their concerns in a different way. But ultimately, the concern is there's something wrong with my child and I don't know how to fix it. That's where we were as well. And what we try to help parents to do is to go from that to my child is perfectly fine. Let me help them to feel perfectly fine. And it's just a different way in to address all of the problems that might be going on.
Absolutely. And it's that point, isn't it, also of knowing there is an outlet, there's somewhere to go. Back to your point at the very beginning, when you're seeking advice, help and support from others, you're not necessarily getting it, knowing that there's somewhere where you can have that open and honest conversation that helps you talk it out and be in that place of acceptance of your child. That's really wonderful. So when we think about Transforming Autism, Guy, it's a small charity. Tell me the importance of small charities, because there is most definitely a place for them.
Yeah, and a good question, as this is Small Charities Week, exactly. And we're celebrating the work of small charities. So large charities are great. Large charities can do really, really good things on a big scale that small charities can't. They can affect huge societal-wide changes. They can launch campaigns that reach people that we small charities would have no hope of reaching. But almost for that reason, they are big coalitions that are looking after, so let's say the National Autistic Society. They have to represent everything to do with autism, from children to adults to all different types of situations. All of the politics that involves around certain types of language that certain types of group would like and wouldn't like. And these can be inhibiting factors to move forward. And the advantage of a small charity being able to focus on one particular area, one particular group of people with particular needs, like we are focusing on parents of young autistic children, we can be sort of hyper-focused. We can be sort of much more granular about what their needs are and how to meet those needs than a really big charity can be. So the big charity has that really umbrella function that can help with so many big societal-wide things. But in terms of the day-to-day work with families that need support now and need specialist support in a particular area, it's only the small charities that can really do that. So that's why they're so vital.
Yeah, absolutely. So if someone was to support Transforming Autism with a donation, and how would that then feed into the support and the difference it would make to a family?
It goes directly to providing services. Now, these services range from, intense support in the home for a certain period that people get to sort of really break through in a very tailored and very sort of concentrated way into this sort of sense of, I know how to create a relationship with my child now. It can be workshops, programs that, online programs and workshops. It may be sort of, resources that we create for people in various different ways. But the idea of every single thing that we do is to get the parent to provide that vital foundation that's going to change the child's life. That's why we called ourselves Transforming Autism, because we're not about making tiny incremental changes to a bedtime routine here or a feeding routine here. It's about changing the whole fundamental of the relationship with the child so that the life of the family and the future of the child can be totally transformed.
That's just incredible, isn't it? I see how fully encompassing, isn't it? It's totally inclusive of the requirement of the family and at times the wider family, I suspect as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You're a grandparent, you know that.
I am a grandparent, yeah. Very much. Yeah, totally. Can you think of, and I appreciate that you won't want to share identities or things, but can you think of any particular stories, any particular family that Transforming Autism has had the ability to, or the opportunity to work with, that have shared the outcome and the benefits, the results that they've had through working with the charity?
Well, there are. I mean, there are some, testimonials also on the YouTube channel from families who felt totally transformed by it. But I like to think that we're not about showcasing one family and saying, okay, this is what some extreme success stories looked at. What we're about is providing that for every family, making that transformation for every family, bringing about a fundamental change in the relationship and the future trajectory of the child in every family that we work with, or as many of them as we possibly can. So it's almost like you'll see those testimonials and they're great and they're about but those things quite routinely change for most families as well. And so every time a family has a breakthrough, every time a parent, makes a connection with their child in a way that they hadn't been able to before as a result of, what they've picked up from working with us. It's the most gratifying feeling in a way. I mean, that's what it's all about.
So building on that, Guy, because that leads neatly into a question I had for you. You talked about the journey from your son through to your, the book, the TED Talk, the charity, your own diagnosis, and all that element here and where we are today and all the services that Transforming Autism offers to support families. If you were going to move this forward another, let's go 10 years, what would you like the outlook to be in the world of autism in 10 years' time?
I would like the emphasis that we place on the relationship with the child to be mainstream. That would be my ideal, that you go to a doctor and their first instinct is to refer you to somebody like us, because there'll be many, many organizations like us at that time who will really get this importance of the relationship and really nurture the family towards that transformational outcome.
And that would be wonderful, wouldn't it? And for the charity itself, if you were going to look at that and go, we've been really successful as a charity, what would define that for you?
That, it's almost the same answer. It's like if we've managed to get our perspective percolated out to the world. And it's not only us, there is a strand of thinking, there is a strand of thought around this. We're not lone voices, but we're still in the minority. We're still small. We're much less small than we used to be when we started, actually.
What's the one thing you know now about autism that you wish you'd known at the very start?
Yeah, it's much easier to be asking the questions than answering them. People have very inspiring answers. I'm not sure mine will quite hit the mark. But I think one thing that I know now that I wish I'd known at the start is just that it's okay, that it's not a problem, that it's not a crisis, that it's and there's actually a lot of beauty in it. And if I could have seen that at the beginning, it would have made my path a lot smoother.
I want to ask you something about one word you used there, because I know it sits within the podcast as well. When you said there's a lot of beauty in it.
Yeah.
Expand on that for me.
Well, when we think of autism, we, as a society, we're sort of conditioned to see where the problems are, that, maybe this milestone isn't being hit this early. But what we don't see is the milestones that are coming early and the extra skills and the extra traits that autistic children have, which are much more common within autism than outside it. So, for example, and every child is different. There's the whole, it's like autism is a spectrum, just like humanity is a spectrum. But, there's a lot of autistic children where the cognitive abilities come extremely early. Daniel was he was comfortable learning about quantum physics when he was 8 years old. He was following intricate philosophical conversations that a 50-year-old would typically be baffled by, and he was just following them like they were common sense. That level of cognitive understanding is there quite early. I find very often there's it's probably not the best word, but I call it an idealism. This, if you go to an autism school, for example, the instances of bullying and cruelty are likely to be much, much less and only confined usually to those children who've actually suffered extreme amounts of them compared with a mainstream school. You talk to autistic adults and there's rarely venom. I mean, sometimes there is because of the sort of life that they've been forced to leave against their will. But there's rarely this natural sort of venom. There's rarely this sort of, people talk about masking. It was one of the things that people talk about with autistic people. But I feel that with autistic people, it's very innocent compared with the sort of masking that you get in the non-autistic world, where you can have somebody on a phone call, for example, laughing and joking with someone as if they're the best friend, and then put the phone down and call them an idiot. An autistic person could never do that. There's a whole load of virtuous qualities, or qualities that we would think of as virtuous, that autistic people have in a much higher proportion than non-autistic people. And yet we only focus on the negatives. So, the beauty is in those things.
That is so powerful, so powerful. And each and every one of those should be celebrated. You're absolutely right. What we hear from the outset is the negative side of it, not the positive side of it, not the extraordinary side of it. And just to share with you, Guy, you're saying about your son with quantum physics. My granddaughter, she loves, although she's non-verbal, she doesn't make sound now, but she loves reading. And you can see she's reading. But the thing that absolutely amazes me is she'll read the book through. She's reading it on her tablet. She'll read it through. Then she'll change the language and read it again.
Oh, wow. Okay.
She reads in about three or four different languages. So I'm waiting for the day.
You'll have a surprise. One day she'll be 12 and she'll be sort of suddenly polylingual.
Exactly. She'll suddenly go, whoa, we'll all go, I've got no idea what you just said to me, but that's extraordinary. So yeah, quite phenomenal. It kind of takes my breath away. So I get it. Thank you. That was a really lovely description of beautiful in the world of autism. What would be the one piece of practical advice you would give to another parent or a person, who's in this world?
Okay, it's a difficult one for the parent, a difficult one for them to do. But, and I think it can only be arrived at through practice, but at least keep it in the mind from the beginning that the goal is to put aside all of the judgments that other people may have, that we may have, because we're a product of society as well. Put aside those judgments, focus on the child, enjoy the child, focus on meeting the child on their own terms, making a relationship with them as they are and as you are, and bridging that gap without judging what the gap is, without judging whether the gap should be there or shouldn't be there, whether it's anything to worry about or not. You can do all of that as well on the side. But in terms of building a relationship with the child, focus on that, focus on them and on building that bridge and accepting them on their own terms.
I love that. That feels like it almost feeds into the third question around what's the one thing that people are still getting wrong about autism. that if we could change it, perceptions would change?
This is another difficult one. And I hope I don't get too semantic with this one. I think it's a lot of it is about, we have this debate often between saying, is this a person who has autism or is it an autistic person? And it just seems like a sort of petty linguistic dispute. But it's actually I think it's actually quite a deeper question, because there's still a predominant perception in society that autism is separate from the autistic person. It's almost like there's this conception, mainstream conception, that there is a normal person who has been afflicted, and people don't use this language, but it's in the assumption, afflicted with an illness called autism. And they are therefore poor sufferers of an illness. And, what our goal should be to eradicate the illness. And I think that is the biggest thing that people get wrong.
Thank you, Guy. You spoke with huge passion there. I can see that's a subject which is really, really important to you. So I really thank you for sharing that. So as we move towards the end of the podcast, I just want to remind our audience that we're taking part in the Big Give Small Charities Week campaign. And we're actively encouraging our listeners and supporters to want to donate for all the reasons that have been articulated through this podcast. So thank you, Guy. If we're able to raise £5,000, that will be doubled. So we'll actually gain £10,000 through the course of that week. And as Guy has referred to, that will only enable us to continue to help many more families who are navigating this journey, for them to be able to really embrace and give the best opportunities and outcomes of the relationship they have with their children and their children for the future. So we'll put all the details to do with this particular campaign on the podcast. There'll be plenty of things on social media as well, and within the notes that go alongside this podcast today. So,
and I think there's a limited time, isn't there, Pip? It's only what's the date that people need to donate by in order for their donation to be doubled?
Yeah, it's in 1 week. It's a period of a week, and it's the week that we are actually in right now. Yes.
And then if they donate on the link that we put in the description, it'll be doubled for us.
Absolutely, yeah. So, Guy, I have one more question for you. Okay, and it's one I thought about as well from the perspective again of my granddaughter. My last question: if your son could hear this conversation, what do you hope he would feel about what you've built with Transforming Autism?
Okay. I have two answers. The obvious answer, the obvious one, the one that you'd expect me to say, is I expect him to be proud. I'd expect him to be affirmed by it, and so on. And there is a part of me that would like that, of course. But I think what I would like more, and I think this is how he sees things, I believe. I might play this interview to him and let him and check with him. Is, well, it's just obvious. It's not something to be particularly proud of. It's just what my daddy is saying is just obvious. Of course, he's going to say that, autistic people have value because all people have value. It doesn't make any sense to think otherwise. That's how I would like him to feel about it.
That's very special. And I would suspect quite probably on the mark with it as well, Guy. So before we come to closing down the podcast for today, this episode, is there anything else that you would really like to share?
All of our services are only possible because people give money generously. We're not, obviously we're a charity, so we don't make profit. All of the money goes into doing what we do. And without that money, we can't help families. And with every extra pound, we go a little step further towards transforming somebody's life. So it would really mean a lot, not to us, well, to us as well, but most importantly to the families who will get benefit out of the work that we do to get as many donations as possible.
So thank you for listening to this special Small Charity Week edition of the Beautiful Reality of Autism. If today's conversation, as Guy said, has resonated with you, we would absolutely love your support. It's the support of our listeners and supporters that can help us raise the £5,000 that we're seeking during the Big Give campaign week. As Guy rightly said, those donations will be doubled, giving us £10,000 more to help more families through the work of Transforming Autism. All the details of how you can support us are going to be in the show notes. They're going to be on our social media and they'll be on our website. But once again, thank you, Guy. Thank you for the time and thank you for taking the time to listen.